Maven ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot. Good. Off the glass. Oklahoma calls timeout. But the game is over. The game is over. Carolina has upset number 1 Oklahoma.
With 20 seconds left to play. Goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good. 63-62, 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Brant Brown looking. Oh, way to Worthy. Worthy 5. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship.
Rebounded by Weber. Michigan out of timeout. Weber front court. Carolina with foul. He takes the timeout. They're out of timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul. Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out the head. Long outside shot. Short rebounded. It's over. Carolina has won the national championship. How about them Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
That's it. Make room for 2017. The Tar Heels are the national daggum champions.
This is the Roy's Boys Podcast with your host, Joshua Marlowe.
Hey everybody, welcome into an edition of the Roy's Boys Podcast powered by Carolina Electrical Services. We're in a little bit of an off week for Carolina. They're a week in between their games between UNCW and Gardner-Webb, so we figured it was a good time to get some guests on. And today we are joined by Sports Illustrated Heels Maven writer Brant Wilkerson-New. Brant, how's it going today, man?
Doing well. Just trying to stay indoors and out of this cold. It does feel like basketball season already around here, though.
Yeah, I walked outside this morning and I couldn't believe how cold it was, and the rain didn't really didn't help the weather as well. It's supposed to be down 22 tonight, so it's gonna be pretty cold here in the Carolinas for early November. Someone who hasn't been cold to start the season has been Cole Anthony. 2 games into the year, 2 double-doubles. We all know what he did against Notre Dame in the season opener. What has impressed you the most about Cole Anthony through so far in the season?
That was an awesome transition, by the way. But Cole Anthony, so far, I think the thing that impresses me the most about him is that he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders right now with this team because of what Carolina has missing from the lineup right now, what they're trying to figure out on the floor. And everybody knows he's going to be shooting the ball, and no one can really stop him from shooting the ball except for himself. He didn't have a great shooting night in Wilmington, still had a great game, though. He's really, I think he's kind of already patented that step back 3 that guys know is coming, and you just really can't do anything about it. And he's been able to show a little bit more of his slashing ability in that game too. He got to the basket pretty well. So I think just the fact that he's been able to take on these expectations, because we've seen so many players that have these expectations as the next number 1 pick, the next best player in college basketball as a freshman. They haven't met that, but he's been right there, and he's handled it very maturely.
Yeah, Cole definitely does seem poised for the spotlight. One thing I've been really impressed with has been his defense, and a lot of times you see freshman point guards under Roy Williams or just freshmen in general struggle defending at a high level, especially in the ACC. What are your takeaways from what you've seen him on the defensive end?
Yeah, he's and that's the thing that you see often with freshmen. I think back to Marvin Bagley when he was at Duke a few years ago. He had all the tools in the world to be an elite rim protector. It never really worked out for him that way, and you always wonder why. And I think for Cole Anthony, he's got, he's not a super elite athlete, but he's a really good athlete. But the thing that he brings to the game the most is that he plays incredibly hard all the time, and that's something that a lot of freshmen don't understand about the game at the ACC level is you can't take plays off, and a lot of defense is your effort. Of course, a lot of it's having the ability, and obviously he's got the ability, but I think effort really sets you apart as a freshman defender, and he plays with that all the time. He competes with that all the time, and I think one of the things that he's really impressed his teammates and coaches with is that he he competes in everything they do. They talk about him winning every running drill, every little competition they have, and I think you kind of see that on the defensive end where he plays with a little bit of an edge, and it's going to be interesting to see that as guys kind of go more at him. I saw it when he played. I saw him play at Peach Jam a while ago. Somebody was trying to go at him, and they had a good, fun back and forth going. So that was fun to watch.
Back in the summer, we recapped last year's season individually, and we talked a lot about Brandon Robinson going to have a big role on this team. And then, of course, he got injured in the exhibition against Winston-Salem State. How much is this particular Carolina basketball team missing the things Brandon Robinson can do?
They're missing it a good bit because, first off, I mean, they did not have a single returner and starter out there on the perimeter. So that's a big deal, especially when you go into an ACC game against a team like Notre Dame where they've got one guy that's got more combined starts than your whole team out there. And I think Brandon Robinson's best quality that we've seen from him at Carolina is just that he's always a positive whenever he's on the floor. He wasn't out there a whole lot always. He got spot minutes more so last year, but every time he was out there, you can kind of count on him doing one little thing right. He would always make one good defensive play. He would always knock down a three from the wing or something like that. So, I think early on, Carolina hasn't had as much of the floor spacing that they need to get Cole Anthony to the basket, which is why he's had to rely on his jump shot so much. Justin Pierce obviously knocked down a few in the last game, but as Carolina is able to get more of Brandon Robinson on the floor, they're going to get a little more floor spacing for those other guys. That opens it up for Cole Anthony to penetrate a little more, and it's certainly going to open it up for the other guys to work in the mid-range and the high post and that sort of thing.
One of those guys that you talk about opening the floor up would be Leaky Black, who hasn't had the best start scoring the basketball. What is that more due because the floor's a little more compacted for him because he hasn't? It's been shot selection, but he also just hasn't finished really well. What's been the problem with him offensively? Because he's doing the things defensively that makes him the kind of unique player he is for Carolina. But this team needs more of him scoring the basketball, right?
Yeah, I think eventually, I think you're going to see him score more of the basketball. That's going to be kind of the ongoing thing. Is I'm not sure if you're going to see necessarily that second scorer kind of emerge immediately. I think for a while it's going to be a lot of guys that are sharing that role. Some nights it'll be Christian Keeling. Some nights it's going to be Justin Pierce, and it'll kind of go back and forth with Garrison Brooks there. But I think the big thing for Leaky is that, this is the first time he's truly played basketball full speed since last January. And he said, I was talking to him after the exhibition game, and he said that he went through 5 recovery plans for his ankle injury before this one finally worked and got him back to close to 100%. And he said even after the Notre Dame game that he wasn't at 100% just yet, but he was finally getting there. So, it takes some time. And I don't think his game is necessarily predicated on offense so much. He's really fits into that Theo Pinson playmaker role where he's going to do a lot of different things. He's going to set guys up with the right pass. He's going to be a really good defender. And occasionally he can score. He can definitely be a big-time scorer if he needs to. But I think there's so many other little things that he can do to affect the game. And we saw a little bit more of that on Friday night. I think I know he had 8 points and 6 rebounds at one point late. I forget exactly what he finished with. But I think he was really involved in that game in a lot of ways.
You mentioned Justin Pierce and Christian Keeling, the two guys I wanted to talk about a little bit. Most times grad transfers don't have the kind of pressure these two guys have had to produce right away, especially coming from smaller conferences to the ACC. What have you seen in their game, the first 2 games, that gives you confidence they'll be a big part of this team moving forward? We noticed Justin Pierce was great against UNCW. Keeling has struggled through the first 2 games. Are these guys going to settle in at some point, or is this going to be a little more of a rocky road for these two as the season goes along?
Yeah, I think Justin Pierce, the first game, what he told me about the first game was that he was just out there trying not to screw up, which, I mean, I can imagine when you go from William & Mary. I went to UNC Wilmington, so I've got great respect for the CAA, but it's a little bit of a different environment than playing basketball in the Smith Center against an ACC opponent. So it's a tough spot to make your first appearance for Carolina in that type of environment. And he said he was just trying not to screw up. He was trying to get in the right place. And he's going back and forth between the 3 and 4, which Roy Williams has talked about a number of times. And I remember Nazir Little was going back and forth at the 3 and 4 last year, and both of those positions have different defensive responsibilities, because the 1 is one thing, the 2 and the 3 are another, and then the 4 and the 5 all have different responsibilities. So basically he's responsible for learning the system from 2 different spots, in addition to being a grad transfer that's learning the stuff on the fly. So, but I think we saw a lot of his tools on Friday night. He's a really good shooter, had a wrist injury that kind of limited that last year at William & Mary. So he could be a big-time shooter out there. And the thing that's going to really, I think, set him apart as to how successful this Carolina team is how well he can rebound the ball at either those 3 or 4 spots. And I think we saw some of that against UNCW when he went to the boards really hard, made a number of plays down there, and finished 2 around the basket. So Keeling's a little tougher to figure out right now. I think we've seen some of his offensive skills on display. He got to the basket a few times, made a few big shots for Carolina in both those games. I watched his highlight tapes from Charleston Southern quite a bit, and I thought his game was going to be really effective in transition, especially as a shooter and just kind of making the right decisions on the break. But the thing that's really limited him so far is his turnovers. He's made a number of careless passes, dribbled a little too much at times, and overall Carolina just hasn't really gotten out on the break and been as successful as they need to. So I think as you see the chemistry improve and just kind of see him settle into, like, hey man, this is ACC defense. It's a little bit different. I think you're going to see him become a lot more successful, and I think he's plenty talented as an offensive player to be the second leading scorer on a lot of nights.
One freshman that kind of flew under the radar once Cole Anthony signed was Armando Bacot, the big man. This guy that we, with his commitment, we were able to go back to play traditional 2 bigs, which of course Roy Williams wants to do, and has really hurt this team in the NCAA tournament the last couple of years, not having the size to match up in March. Have you seen enough from him early on that he's going to be a guy that's going to be able to be on the floor 28 to 32 minutes as Carolina wants to get back to playing the way it wants to play? Or is this still going to be a situation where Carolina is going to play a lot of small ball with him being a freshman?
No, I think he's an integral part of what they want to do this year with the 2 big lineup. And, it's pretty tough to take any conclusions from the first 2 games with him. But I think you can see a lot of the skills and the minutes he got against Notre Dame. And then he didn't get he got 3 total minutes against UNCW before he got in foul trouble and then took a shot to the head that knocked him out of the game. So, but I think you see his offensive ability for sure. He's got great touch around the basket. He's got traditional kind of big man post moves, but he also has the ability to step outside and knock down a jumper or 2 from about the foul line. So, obviously I think Roy Williams loves that. And Garrison Brooks is more of your dirty work big guy, although he's improved his offense. He's the guy that's going to do all the little things right and get rebounds and defend down there, while Armando is more of an offensive player, because it does take a little bit of time for freshman big guys to learn how to defend at this level. But absolutely, I think that he is going to be, a 25, 30-minute-a-night guy for Carolina all season long.
2 areas Carolina has struggled at early on in this year has been foul shooting and their lack of transition points. Which one would be more concerning moving forward?
The transition points, I think, is the bigger concern, because, that is Carolina basketball. But with that said, it's been such a moving part situation with the roster where Leaky Black didn't really practice for I think Roy said the 10 out of the first 26 practices. He wasn't even out there really. And then they had the JV point guard Robbie O'Han come up and run with them for a while. So they really haven't had a great opportunity to get into what they really want to do. So that stuff's learning on the fly. And I think they've got so many moving parts where they're learning what they like, what they don't like on the break. I think particularly for Keeling and Pierce, those 2 guys are going to be huge as far as getting themselves to the wings and knocking down transition shots over there. And I think one of the pleasant surprises, and something I just wrote about in a thing I published a little while ago, is Andrew Platek really has shown some ability as a passer. So that's going to be interesting to see down over the next coming weeks. And as far as free throw shooting goes, I think that's just kind of one of those strange things that happens to teams early on. I think if it's something that continues for the next few weeks, it would definitely be a concern. It was, we've seen it sink some teams around here in the past. We saw it sink Duke last year nearly. So, I think the transition stuff has to really get coming along faster than anything before you start worrying about free throws.
A couple more things, and I'll get you out of here. We've seen Roy Williams early on this year call a timeout to kind of get Cole Anthony a breather. He seems to be a little more